To order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Present.
Mr. Hayes? Ms. Huth? Mr. Otto?
Present.
Ms. Pat?
Present.
Mr. Whalen? Ms. Wyman?
Here.
Mayor Satterthwaite?
Here. We did get a call from Mr. Whalen earlier this afternoon saying he's not feeling well and will not be in attendance tonight. Just to let everyone know, we're operating off the corrected agenda for Tuesday, September 7th. And before we get started with the meeting, I'll ask everyone to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First on our agenda this evening is approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion?
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Any additions or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Additions or corrections to the agenda? Just one. One change I'd like to ask council members. We do have a number of people here that are interested in what's listed as item 6 under new business, a development agreement with Timponi Petrie Partnership. And if there's no objection, if we could entertain that piece of business right before old business. Is there any objection to that? Okay, we'll go ahead and move item 6 of new business to the top of the agenda then. Pick up one of these white cards at the back of the room. You'll have a chance to do so. First is Christopher Alex, 301 East George Huff, on the topic of the MOR. Chris is a member of our Plan Commission.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the Council. I just wanted to speak briefly today on the manner in which the Council has handled the Plan Commission's recommendation with regard to the MOR district. I was very pleased to see that the Council has taken to heart the recommendations that the Plan Commission forwarded and has substantially indicated its interest in adopting those. One cornerstone of that recommendation was the notion that things that were specifically prohibited or required should be more appropriately put in the zoning ordinance, and things that were merely guidelines or recommendations, which it was attendant on the Design Review Board to enforce, were appropriate to include in the design guidelines. And I really appreciate that the Council has preserved that and indicated that the things that they propose to offer as specific requirements, mandates, are to be incorporated in the zoning ordinance. I only had one concern with one of those, and that was the requirement that the primary entrance of a structure be located in the facade zone of the most primary street bordering the property. My concern is just that there may be circumstances such as duplexes on a corner lot, or multiplexes, or business occupancies where you might have front entrance and a rear entrance, or entrances on multiple sides of the building. As you're no doubt aware, we have several buildings in downtown that are commercial buildings that have multiple entrances or entrances facing multiple streets. And in the more business-oriented areas of the MOR district, my concern might be that it would be difficult to identify what was, in fact, the primary entrance, and that might be a restriction that would interfere with the having an architect use the lot in the most effective manner. I would propose that the Council consider modifying that requirement to be that a primary entrance, or at least one entrance, be located in the facade zone of the most primary street, to give architects some flexibility and avoid arguments with regard to what constitutes the primary entrance in a situation where there are multiple entrances. Anyway, that was all I wanted to say. I appreciate the Council's taking our recommendations to heart, and I'm very excited about seeing these finally move forward. I did have another comment on an unrelated issue, which is the Timponi Petrie development that's being discussed tonight. Speaking not as a member of the Plan Commission, but as a citizen and a downtown employer, I was elated to hear about this project, as I'm sure most other people in the audience were as well. I think from looking at this from a planning perspective, this is all of the kind of things that we're looking for. We're trying to get people with disposable income and who are going to take a personal ownership in downtown to live downtown. We're trying to get lots that are underutilized, redeveloped. We're trying to get infill development, and we're trying to get development that is multi-use and that really integrates well with all the existing uses downtown. I think this, based on the limited information we've had to date about this proposal, I'm very excited about it, and I would certainly encourage the city to offer all available assistance and support to this and future proposals along this line. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Alex? All right, thank you. Any other petitions or communications from members of the public? All right, from council members?
Yeah, I go.
Yes, Mr. Hayes?
There's a couple of reminders. I just want to remind people that government has an awesome responsibility to take care of the needs of the citizens. Safety, welfare, morale, economic development, to name a few. And it's very difficult because these citizens fall into many categories. You got those living the good life, and those who so far down on their luck that they don't bother to look up. And we used to name some of these people: the homeless, the helpless, the convicted, the addicted, afflicted, unemployed, and uninspired. And to that list we can add the uncalled, the unanswered, and the uncommitted. Well, on November 2nd is election at the national level. We elect our president, state senators, and county board members, and et cetera, et cetera. Very important. And then in December, petitions will be filed for those persons running for local government. And I'm announcing at this time that I will not be a candidate for Alderman Ward 3 in the next election.
Okay, well, thanks, Jim, and well, congratulations on your retirement. It certainly has been enjoyable serving with you. It's guess this will be the end of your third term, am I right?
Right.
12 years. So on behalf of the citizens of Urbana, let me be the first to thank you for your years of service and your dedication to issue after issue, being a council member that's regularly attended all the meetings and contributed positively, and always served on boards and commissions whenever asked, and going above and beyond the call of duty. So thank you for your service to the city over the last 3 terms. I did have another card I didn't see here. John Barella, 611 West Green, on the ethics ordinance.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I would urge the council to undo the amendment made to the ethics ordinance at the August 9th meeting, removing the more explicit definitions of indirect financial interest, including immediate family and roommates. There appear to be 2 major concerns of this council. The first, that the more explicit definitions would somehow overstep the city's authority, and the second, that the restrictions do not adequately cover all cases of indirect financial interests. I'm somewhat puzzled over the first concern about overstepping the city's authority. Over the course of this term, the council has extended Illinois and federal law on numerous occasions. One example is the incorporation of criminal history as a protected class in the Urbana Human Rights Code for housing. This protection is not given in our neighboring city of Champaign, but is a reflection of our community's desire to help out those who may have made a mistake by reforming their lives. Another example is the resolution condemning the Iraq War. The council felt that the city's residents were against the war and passed a resolution in line with that feeling. This is in spite of the fact that the city council has no powers over U.S. foreign affairs. In light of these examples, I don't understand how the council can argue that the particular listing of indirect conflicts would violate state law or contravene the spirit of the state ethics statute. The above ordinance and resolution demonstrate to me a community that wants to improve the lives of all of its citizens and desires honest, effective government. This is exactly the effect and the spirit of the unamended ordinance. Much has also been made of the Illinois State Supreme Court decision that a husband does not have an a priori indirect financial interest in his wife's company. I myself was shocked to learn this fact and would want to live in a community that finds this decision as appalling as I do and would seek to eliminate this loophole. In addition, like Ms. Pat, I would like an ethics ordinance that prevents an alderman from giving his golf buddy contracts and, in addition, giving contracts to lifelong friends. Unfortunately, we can only write an effective ordinance in the first case. The law can clearly differentiate between who is husband and who is wife, while it quickly becomes impossible to find exactly who is a golfing buddy or who is merely an acquaintance and who is a lifelong friend. Just because we haven't agreed to the proper wording for the relationships that signal one form of impropriety doesn't mean that we should that another should be allowed to remain. Another point of contention about the definitions that were removed was why a roommate was included. Although I agree with Mr. Otto that I've always had an indirect financial interest in all of my roommates, I think another one of the council's concerns can be much more adequately addressed by roommates, that of domestic partners. I know that the proposed ordinance gives some indication, some guidance as to what exactly constitutes a domestic partner, but of all the people who have domestic partners I've met, they've all been roommates. So this provides a great, very definite backstop in the ordinance to what exactly is a domestic partner and when that relationship is severed, which I do know is a key concern of the council's. In all, I would urge the council to think strongly about passing the current amended ordinance. Although I understand the council's desire for flexibility in a tricky subject, I'd hope that the council would err on the side of caution. Does making the immediate family members and roommates an automatic direct financial interest create some interests that truly don't exist? Probably, but it makes a clear commitment to the people of Urbana that the ideals of honest, effective government will be upheld. Thank you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Any other petitions and communications? Members of the public? Council members? Okay, if we have none, then we'll go into item 6 of new business, which is ordinance number 2004-09-119, an ordinance approving a development agreement with Timponi Petrie LLC. And I know you've got a PowerPoint presentation. Did you want to start off with that?
Right, we'll start with this. Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present our proposal to you this evening. It's something we're very excited about, and we're honored that you would entertain this proposal for the Stratford site at the corner of Water and Race Street in downtown Urbana. I want to walk through briefly a few of the highlights for you so that you know what you're voting on this evening. Let me start with the most important part, and that is the group of the team that's really presenting this to you and that's going to see it through to fruition. Ray Timponi Jr. Is to my right. Ray Timponi Sr. is in the back here. Andrew Fell is on the architecture team. Pat Fitzgerald is going to represent us with the legal documents, and Ramshaw Realty is going to help us with the leasing efforts. It's a team that we think has a lot of history. We know has a great deal of history in Urbana, is very excited about the opportunities that this presents, and as far as we're concerned, we're just getting started. Let me briefly talk about the vision that we have, and I think that we share with many of you in the City Council and the leadership of the city. First of all, it's crucially important, the leadership that Bruce Walden, that Mayor Satterthwaite, and that the strong support that the City Council has given that has really gotten us to the point where we're very interested in pursuing this kind of an opportunity. They have had consistent and visionary leadership, and that's really the reason that we're here with you this afternoon. We're excited, and we think the success in neighboring Champaign is a good thing for Urbana. We see this as a unified community of Urbana-Champaign, and we look forward to transferring the successes from Urbana to Champaign and from Champaign to Urbana. We see those as complementary. In addition, we think there's an opportunity to provide some things that the success in downtown Champaign has not been able to provide. They've had great success in providing a very nice bar scene. There's increased business, but that also brings some negatives with it, including congestion, et cetera. And what we like and what we think is truly unique about downtown Urbana is that it's a much more family-oriented location. It's great for restaurants. It's a great deal of tolerance and inclusive attitude, which we think is very important for some of the other people and components that we think are important in downtown Urbana, such as artists and high-tech related individuals. So that's really the niche that we see that we're trying to fill, and that is artists, restaurants, high-tech firms. Those are the kinds of groups and entities that are naturally coming to Urbana, sensing the excitement that is coming to downtown Urbana, and we want to be one of the first to really take advantage of that and see that grow. The proposal itself is for upscaled housing and office component combination. We'll call that Stratford Residences. It's going to be 4 stories, 50,000 square feet, brick and limestone exterior, 41 luxury apartments and some office components. If we could show the rendering, just to give you a feel for what this is going to look like from the exterior. There we go. Okay, perfect. This is looking at it from the corner of the southwest corner as if you are at Water and Race Street. So you'll notice the front entrance there at that corner of Race and Water. That is going to be to the office component, and that office component then will extend north, encompassing 2,000 to 4,000 square feet. We've got then 2 floors above that on that elevation, and then as you move north along the building, we've got a total of 4 floors comprising the building.
Yeah, can you move it down?
Brick and limestone exterior. We put in the flat roof because that's consistent with downtown Urbana architecture. We think that the exterior of the building and the quality of the interior of the building, which is all going to be upscale, really fit into this niche quite nicely. So, for instance, I talk about these being upscale units. Let me tell you what we mean by that. It's going to be they're all going to have 9-foot ceilings, for instance. There's going to be ceramic floors. Many of these are going to have wood floors. Some of them will have skylights. They're all going to have washer-dryer units included. They're going to be large relative to most apartments. Really, we're going to be targeting young professionals, whether they work at Carl, which of course is a couple blocks away, a very easy walk to work there, whether they are associated with the many government-related businesses, courthouse, et cetera. All of those individuals are going to be important customers of ours. Young professionals associated with the university is also going to be key. So we see this as a real opportunity to serve the needs of those individuals who are looking for a very pleasant downtown urban environment where they can walk to some of the best restaurants in the community, can walk to get their groceries, can walk to the hospital, can go to the library, can walk to Crystal Lake Park, can go to the pool. All of those things are not just walking distance, they're all stone's throw from this development. So it's something we're terribly excited about. I think I'll leave it at that for now, and we'll entertain any questions that you might have.
Yes, Ms. Lyman?
Is the development proposed to have, like, access to the rooftop, like for garden roofs, those sorts of amenities? No?
No, not at this time, it isn't, no.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? So have you guys got any idea when you're going to start?
Soon.
October 1.
October 1?
Mayor.
Okay.
October 1. And let me, speaking to that, it wasn't but 6 weeks ago that we had a general concept of doing this development. And there was an RFP out, and it was put out to local developers as well as other developers, and others responded. But I tell you, over the past 6 weeks, to go from a concept of a development to through a letter of intent, and now to the hope for approval of a developer agreement, is remarkably fast, and I would say is just one indication of numerous that we have had as a team as to just how serious the city of Urbana is and how organized the city of Urbana is about its development prospects. So we have just seen the city bend over backwards to do and to get some of these projects off the ground, and just has led to increased confidence on our part. So we're very excited and want to thank Bruce Walden and the mayor and the support of the city council for making that possible.
If there are no other questions for the developers, maybe we'll hear from Mr. Walden about some of the particulars of the agreement itself.
Well, our facade of being organized has done very well, because at 5:30 I provided you the latest copy this evening. It's still warm from the Xerox machine, but this is the most recent development agreement. As Joe indicated, we have had a lot of work to do in a relatively short period of time. It's very difficult to bring all this together, including all the exhibits and legal descriptions and whatnot. Let me just say, I won't review. Ryan has produced a memo, sort of gave you the background, but we went over that a couple of weeks ago in terms of the RFP process and how this is consistent with our vision for downtown. Let me just focus briefly on the development agreement. There are just a couple of changes that I will note since the draft copy was in the packet. Most of them are very minor. First of all, you do have exhibits that are correct with this copy. On page 3, there are a couple of changes to the developer project. I would just draw your attention to that paragraph. The language for the office is not less than 2,000 square feet. I had a range in the previous copy. The brick and limestone is the minimum. Brick and limestone are the two facades that are street frontage. Don't know yet if there'll be brick and limestone on the rear of the building. Probably not, as a cost consideration. So the minimum that's required is on the two street frontages. There are a couple of changes to, as I mentioned, to the legal description. And then lastly, since this has come about so quickly, we have not, or the developers have not finally inked their development agreement, including the limited liability corporation. I understand that the developers' attorneys should try to, hopefully we'll finish that up of Thursday of this week. And what I plan to do upon passage of this is the mayor actually won't sign it until we put in the, I think it's going to be Timponi Limited Liability Corporation, but P&T, but we will not fill that blank in, and we'll fill that blank in just prior to the mayor executing the agreement. And again, this is on a fast track. We typically have the I's dotted and T's crossed prior to this point. However, it's more important for us to get this thing under construction this fall, and so we've kind of been as flexible as possible to do what we do many times in Urbana on these projects, is fast track them through. So that's where we are. Again, we are very excited at the staff level about this project. We've known the Timponi family for years. We know Joe. I've got to know Joe. We spent a lot of time together in the last couple of weeks, and we're extremely pleased to go forward with this project, and very proud to have this project in downtown Urbana, and certainly very excited about the investment in our community. So with that, I'll answer questions and would recommend strongly approval of this document.
Questions, Ms. Chenoweth?
Just on the, thank you for doing this so quickly. First off, second question is, I've already given away my old copy of to the press, so the 2,000 square feet, what did it say before?
I think it was 2,000 to 4,000. It was a range.
Okay. And do we have any sense that it would be? Is there some reason why we didn't write 4,000 down, for example?
Well, we just put the minimum in.
Okay.
This document just contains the very minimum that could be office. It could be much larger than that if they want it to be.
Okay, but it's my understanding when you all break ground October 1st, or it started work October 1st, that you're really looking at something closer to 4,000 square foot of office or retail space. Is that correct? Or
Those plans are still being revised a little bit, but I would say probably 2,000 to 3,000.
2,000 to 3,000?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's all.
Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Wyman?
On Exhibit B, there's between the Station Theater residences and the Phase 3 office residence, there's a space marking for an area of open space. Is that designed to be concrete, grass, park, walkway? Do you have ideas?
Those are early. That's an early conceptualization of how Phase 1, 2, and 3 will fit together, and we would like very much to incorporate a significant amount of green space. That open space that you see on that diagram is designed to be green space. We've since had conversations with the city, and we think there's ways to keep that same amount of green space but maximize it for the neighborhood. So it may well shift and hopefully be a little bit more accessible to the general population.
Okay. And one other question. Is it part of this plan, or would it be a separate plan to work on beautification of the railroad railroad and the things growing or not growing around it, which is south of the Phase 2 residential area, I believe. Or is maybe that's...
It's hard to see it upside down, but it'd be just north of Phase 2.
Okay.
So we would love to get started on that as early as possible. We're going to need to work with the city on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's our expectation that's probably realistically at Phase 2, later phase.
But we're very interested in that. We would like to clean up that area and make that a nice green space. We think that would add a lot of attractiveness to our project and in downtown Urbana.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's all.
Any other questions? Yes.
I would just add to the one of our projects this winter on our engineering planning team will be to look at how to integrate this type of development downtown with the boneyard, and we're going to study that and its potential for linkages to future bikeway and linkages pedestrian-wise to the Carl campus. And so one of the things that we're going to try to study is how to best maximize some of the positive attributes of that area and integrate it into these types of developments. We do have some funding set aside for that. There's some CCDC monies that are still in an interest-bearing account for beautification along there. We also need to integrate that work into what we do on Race Street. We're going to rebuild Race Street at some point and probably replace the Race Street Bridge. And part of that's keyed upon when other developments take place on Race Street. But our task at the staff level will be to try to plan how to integrate those things together, and we're going to be working on that this winter.
Any other questions? Not, a motion would be in order.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Ms. Chenoweth?
Hats off to the Timponis and Petries on this project. I'm very excited to see local folks step up to the plate, and really, more than stepping up to the plate, I see you all as seeing an opportunity that to me has seemed obvious for a while, and that opportunity is what the downtown can give to developers, and it's what the downtown can become for the residents of Urbana. I think that you're making history by building this building, and that people in Urbana, they understand history, and they know who built buildings, and they know what the history of those buildings are. It's kind of amazing to live in a town where people have such a strong sense of how things were built. I think that you will prove to others the benefit of doing so, and that you're in some way blazing the trail, as people have in the past in downtown Urbana, to prove to other developers in the area that this is really the way that we need to go in our downtown. So I look forward to that. I'm particularly excited to see that, I think that we're, in terms of downtown, we need to add office, we need to add retail, we need to add residential, and I think residential is the right place to start. I think that we need more bodies in downtown. We need people who are living there, and not just, right now, it's really thought of as a place to, you go and you work. I'm one of those people. I go and I work, and then I go back to my neighborhood, and I think that it needs to be a great place to work, to live, to play, to shop, et cetera. And so that this is the first step in, I think, this phase of downtown's blossoming. And I appreciate you all seizing this opportunity.
Any further discussion, Ms. Wyman?
I just want to echo those comments and add, as someone who lives just one block from downtown, I already know the advantages and how wonderful it is to be able to be so close to so many amenities, and I think this will continue to add to those amenities and the number of people who can take advantage of that. I hope that in this open space area that's currently proposed between Phase 2 or Phase 3 and the Station Theater residences, that's an opportunity or provide a way to be able, for the entire public and not just the residences, to be able to share in that and again see that open space, and for the community, those working, those living, and those just taking advantage of all of the great aspects of downtown, to be able to really to integrate that and to be able to take advantage of that. But I think this looks like a wonderful plan and appreciate all your work. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I'd like to say something.
Yeah, sure, Ray.
I was born in Urbana. I've lived here 50 years. Well, 52, who's counting? But, this project represents, in effect, a long overdue new beginning for downtown Urbana. We will establish a new era of construction and renovation. Urbana, for too long, has been seen as an obstruction to development. We do not believe this. We don't believe this is true. We instead see a great opportunity to create a new and vibrant downtown in concert with the city of Urbana. Urbana can easily develop a downtown that is a center for business and community, and we want to lead this renaissance. My family has believed in downtown Urbana for over 50 years, and we want to bring a fresh approach to reinventing downtown. As I stated at our last meeting, we are willing to put our names and a significant amount of capital to jumpstart this process. And we want to work with the city and the council, Mr. Walden, and all concerned parties to create this new opportunity. We encourage new developers to take a look at downtown Urbana. We have invested in Urbana for the past 50 years, and we want to invest for the next 50 years. I want my grandchildren to be proud of this project. We want to build a proud legacy for Urbana and its future, and we welcome everyone's help to achieve this great new direction for downtown. And I just want to say in closing, just everyone that I've talked to, my business acquaintances, my peers, and my friends, they are very excited about this project, and there's a buzz. And like you said, we're changing Urbana. This is history in the making, and we're proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Amen, brother.
Any other discussion? Yes, Milton?
I will just quickly add my kudos to the other ones that you've already been given. That was when I ran for city council, one of my major goals was to see more redevelopment in downtown along these lines, and I'm really glad to see the Timpone family taking the lead on this. You guys have a big impact on downtown, and it's going to be an even bigger and better impact, and so this is really exciting. Thanks a lot.
Further discussion? I'd like to add my thanks to the developers for taking on this challenge. Of course, I've known Ray and his dad for a long time, as growing up together and being in business in the same neighborhood. And so I've seen downtown Urbana, and this is really a new start for downtown. And Ray and Mr. Timpone, I really appreciate your belief in downtown, your continued belief in downtown. You've always been a big part of it. And so this is a terrific new step, and I just can't thank you enough for having the the courage to take the challenge and start something that I think is really going to be something that people will want to model their developments after in the future. So I'm just looking forward to that ribbon cutting and getting a hole in the ground there.
Thanks, Mayor.
Well, if there's no further discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 5 ayes. Congratulations, fellas. Let's get to work.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll start on old business then. Item 1 under old business is an ordinance approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium Community Housing Development Organization Developer Agreement, Urban League of Champaign County Development Corporation, the lease purchase program for fiscal year 2004-2005. And this came from the August 16th council meeting. Bob, are you going to present some material on this?
Sure, just a couple of thoughts. And Gene Algie is with us this evening from Urban League to answer questions. The memo in the packet simply reflects the results of a meeting that we had to discuss council's interest in extending the affordability period, and Jean shared her perspective on the matter, and what we've put forward is sort of something in writing to the effect that we feel like we're better positioned to look at this in the upcoming in 05-06. Jean noted the notion that her wait list is geared on this, her program model's based on this, and it was just maybe in a sense summing up sort of a short notice for the Urban League. So that's sort of our outcome of our meeting, and Jean, if you'd like to share any other impressions or share information.
Good evening. As Bob stated, I did meet with Ms. Wyman and Bob last week. I think it was a positive meeting. I think that all of us have the common goal of providing affordable housing to the clients that we serve. However, we started marketing the program as of July 1 for our home buyers, and we currently have a waiting list. I do agree that we do need to revisit the program, possibly with the high cost of housing now. We need to look at it and maybe look at putting more subsidy into the program. By doing that, that automatically will run it over into 10-year affordability period. So I would ask and like to suggest that you agree to approve this tonight, and then next year we look at revisiting this and do the 10-year affordability period.
Okay, any questions? Ms. Wyman?
Yeah, I want to thank you for meeting with Mr. Gruey and I about this. One of the things I also recall from the meeting was that though this year we want to keep, you suggested, and I think it makes sense, to keep the affordability period as was stated in the original agreement and proposal, that in the next year or so that it could be increased to 6 or 7 years, that you didn't see a big problem in that. And as I understand it, the affordability period being raised to 10 years could occur, but would not be required to occur unless the city provided more than, is it $14,999 per unit, which is what we're currently at. I just want to say I'm encouraged by this. I hope that we're able to see some changes. I certainly will try to make it to the Community Development Commission meetings to observe and hopefully help move this proposal along to include to increase the affordability. And I think that it makes sense that Urban League can be the really blaze the trail in increasing affordability for housing throughout our community for low to moderate income households, that the city is assisting with financial incentives through various CHODOs like Urban League. So I want to thank you and look forward to continuing this work and increasing affordability time spans in the coming year and in years to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, a motion will be in order.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries with 5 ayes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming, Jeannie. The next 2 items are in regard to the mixed office residential district and the guidelines. The first is an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of the City of Urbana, Illinois, revisions to various sections of the Urbana zoning ordinance as they pertain to the requirements of the MOR, Mixed Office Residential Zoning District. This was plan case number 1897-T-04. This came from the last committee.
There's
Kowalski?
really nothing new to add on these 2 items. I just want to clarify that one of the conditions that was placed in the zoning ordinance related to the main entrance of the structure, just to refresh your memory, it's been a few weeks, but the requirement will read, the main entrance of a building must be on the street side of the building. If the lot has more than one street frontage, then the main entrance shall be on the more major frontage. So it doesn't preclude an entrance. It's not the main entrance from being on a street, but the main entrance must be on the street frontage.
So you're saying it doesn't preclude multiple entrances?
Right. Correct.
Okay, so you could have multiple entrances. Okay.
Other than that,
Any
there's-
questions? Okay, if not, a motion would be in
Move
order.
approval.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Yes. Mr. Otto?
No.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 4 ayes. Next are the related design guidelines for the MOR district. This is an ordinance approving design guidelines, the MOR Mixed Office Residential Zoning District Design Guidelines, Plan Case Number 1897-T-04. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Mr. Otto?
No.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 4 ayes. And next, we have an ordinance regarding city officials and employee ethics and political activity. And so this was at a council meeting previous council meeting that Mr. Otto was unable to be at. He requested that it be sent to this meeting, and his request was honored by the council, so here it is.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Yes, Mr. Otto?
Yes, first, I'd just like to thank the council for its courtesy in going ahead and deferring this until I could be here. Unfortunately, I was unable to make it to the council meeting. When this was initially discussed, I found out about 10 minutes before the meeting that a close personal friend of mine had died and was in no shape to come to the council meeting. So I do appreciate the courtesy and collegiality that you all demonstrated by deferring this until I've had a chance to be here. Having said that, some of the things that I have to say tonight are they're hard to say. I don't like to criticize other people, and I always prefer to go forward in a positive manner rather than trying to criticize someone else. But I think ethics are really important, and I don't think we can just sit silently by and not say anything while some of the things that have gone on and are going on continue to go on. When the Walmart issue came up, that was an issue that I cared about very passionately. Number one, because I felt very strongly that we needed, and we still do need, that retail tax base in Urbana. It's a key component of our local business community that's missing. And I also felt very passionately because my brother was involved. And I know his history in owning that particular parcel for 25 years and trying to develop it. And he's went through tremendous trials and tribulations and near misses. And there was nothing I wanted more than to get involved and advocate for what I thought on its merits was a good idea, and for something that would help my brother out. To talk to staff, there was a, you all were here for the debate. You know how heated and controversial and back and forth it was, and I really wanted to lend my voice to those advocating in favor of what we were doing out there. But I didn't. I not only didn't talk to staff, I told them not to contact me. I abstained from all the votes. But in addition to that, I not only abstained from all the votes, I excused myself from all the discussions to the point of leaving the room whenever that issue came up. And it was a hard thing to do because I really thought what was at stake was something that vitally affected Urbana and Urbana's best interests. And as it turns out, it wouldn't have been a violation of Illinois law for me to sit here and participate in that decision, advocate on behalf of my brother, and talk to staff and argue with them that they should take a position that's favorable to my brother. But I didn't do that, and I don't think it's because I'm heroic or exceptional or have some kind of ethical antenna that exceed or go beyond what most people do. To me, it seemed like simple ethics. I didn't ask anybody for a legal opinion. I didn't require any prompting from the city attorney. It just seemed self-evident that that would be improper for me to involve myself in any way in discussions of that decision with staff or with council, and particularly in terms of voting or anything like that. When we contrast that with the approach that was taken in the story in the News Gazette, I think what was going on there was wrong. We had a member of council who was continuing to contact staff and to lobby for positions that advantaged her particular organization that she was leading, even though those staff, their appointments are for 1 year. They're renewed every year, and they require her approval. And she was coming in and asking them for $250,000. That's just, it's clearly inappropriate, regardless of what HUD regulations say or what state law says. Everyone must know that that's inappropriate, and if it's not prohibited by HUD regulations or state law, then it certainly ought to be prohibited in the Urbana ethics ordinance. There was also, suggesting to staff that they use third parties to avoid HUD regulations. Again, I just, to say it, I think, is to make clear that that's just very inappropriate. And then, I guess the thing that really topped it all off was blaming staff and claiming that, the council member was given poor advice, and that's why she ended up, crossing all of these ethical guidelines and boundaries. And that just can't be the case. These sorts of things that were done, if they were done as reported on the newspaper, anyone should know that that's inappropriate. It's also come to my attention that a council member has gone even further in moving on the floor of council to award almost $20,000 to an organization that was controlled and was organized and led by her roommate. And she didn't disclose this to other members of City Council. She didn't recuse herself from the discussion, but she actually made the motion and led the discussion and voted in favor of amending the budget to award that. And these things are wrong. This is not how we should be doing business in Urbana with the trust that we've been given by taxpayers and by the people. And so I plead with council, please don't gerrymander this ethics ordinance. Reinstate the provisions of the ethics ordinance, barring council members from awarding city money to relatives and to roommates. And so I have a motion to make. I move that we amend the main motion to add to section 2-207 in the second sentence, after the word officer, the phrase, or to any relative, as the term relative is described in section 2-205, paragraph 6, period. Let me go through section 2-205, paragraph 6. That describes a relative as those people who are the father, mother, son, daughter, brother, sister, uncle, aunt, great uncle, first cousin, nephew, niece, husband, wife, domestic partner, roommate, or housemate, grandfather, grandmother, grandson, granddaughter, father-in-law, mother-in-law, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, stepfather, stepmother, stepson, stepdaughter, stepbrother, stepsister, half-brother, half-sister, and including the father, mother, grandmother, grandfather or grandmother of the recipient's spouse, domestic partner, and or the recipient's fiancé or fiancé. That's a lengthy list. Basically what it describes is not, some distant third cousin once removed, but basically everybody who is in the first degree of relation. All of your siblings, all of your children, your parents, and it also includes your first cousins, which would be the only people included who would be beyond that first degree of relatives. It's something that everyone can easily determine in this town who their first cousins are, who their grandfathers, grandmothers, sons and daughters are. And it's a very simple and I think essential part of this ethics ordinance, and I sincerely hope that my motion will have a second and then it will pass, because I really don't think that we're up to pass it without this provision. So moved.
We have a motion to amend Section 2-207 of this ethics ordinance. Is there a second? No second. Motion dies for lack of a second. Mr. Rauter, did you still want the floor?
No. I think I've made clear my disappointment.
So, any other discussion on the main motion?
Thank you. This ordinance that we are considering is a combination of the ordinance proposed by the Attorney General having to do with ethics, which focuses mostly on political activity and restrictions on the on public officials' use of public time and space for political activity, and on a gift ban. And it's been in response to a number of problems that have occurred in state government. As approved in committee, this ordinance goes even further to include a conflict of interest, which was not part of the Attorney General's prototype ordinance, and will, in fact, when enacted, make Urbana's ethics ordinance stronger and more comprehensive than similar ordinances passed in other communities. The conflict of interest section correctly reflects the provisions of state law, and that is something that I support, and I think actually the Council unanimously supported it. It is important to recognize that by doing that, by making our ordinance stricter and more comprehensive than other communities, we are enabling a city administration to use this ordinance in both appropriate and perhaps inappropriate ways. And that is my only reservation about it, to avoid any unnecessary upset or offense. I mean to offend no one. I will say, let's turn the clock ahead 15 years to a different city council and a different mayor. If a city administration, a mayor and the administration wanted to harass a council member for political purposes, this would be one vehicle that could be used for that, which is why I think it's important that we keep the language regarding conflict of interest consistent with the requirements of state law and not add a long grocery list of a family tree or other relationships that have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with finances or financial relationships. I think what we've done here is very wise. I'd also like to just mention, for members of the public, this city council did not approve giving money to an entity that is associated with the roommate of any council member. That is a false claim that is made for the purpose of, well, for some purpose other than good purposes, in my opinion. The city council approved a budget amendment to buy equipment for the public benefit, and it was not the intention, nor do I think it's even possible, for a penny of that money to go to the entity in which a person who now is not even any longer a roommate of a council member is involved. And it is just that type of misrepresentation for political motivation that we need to protect against when passing an ethics ordinance. The greatest irony would be the misuse of an ethics ordinance for unethical purposes. I think what we have here is a good law that accomplishes the purpose intended by the Attorney General, and that it even reaches farther than what most other communities are doing, and is consistent with the commitment to high ethical standards that we all share.
Is there further discussion? Chenoweth.
Could I just, a point of personal privilege, is Ms. Pat saying that what I said was false?
That's what I understand.
Yes, Mr. Otto. The statement that the money, and what you're referring to is the money for the wireless fidelity, and that money was going to the roommate of a council member. That's not true. And if you really don't know that that's not true, then we can have a discussion afterward about that. But the money that we approved in the budget was to buy equipment to stick on the tops of buildings. It was not to give to the community wireless network. The community wireless network does not make the equipment. They do not sell the equipment. And there is no reason to think the money is going to them unless one did not understand what it was we were voting at the time. But we were voting to buy equipment for the city, which I believe the city would not only buy but own. And if anyone were going to own it other than the city, and I don't know if this would be the case, it'd be the owners of the buildings that we'd stick it on. But I don't think that was the plan. I think the plan is for the city to actually own the equipment. But the money was not. The motion that was made and that was voted on, the amendment to the budget, was not to give money to the not-for-profit organization that might give free consulting to the city if we so choose. But it is not to give money to that organization. If it were to give money to that organization, then I'm sure the whole thing would have played out differently.
Okay. Ms. Pat is sort of changing in mid-stroke her account of what I said. Initially, she said that I said that money was given to the roommate. In fact, what I said was it was given to an organization led by the roommate. And I guess all I can say is whether it's, a check for $20,000 or whether it's equipment for $20,000 or whether it's the use of equipment worth $20,000 makes not one bit of difference. It's still a benefit worth $20,000 to an organization that's led by your roommate.
The organization is not getting the equipment. We will buy the equipment. We will keep the equipment. The equipment is ours, not the organization's. The organization has nothing to do with it, other than it may provide us with free consulting if we choose, and we don't have to choose.
We can take this up at another time, and but there, certainly to clarify the original proposal, Ms. Pat is right that in the budget, it's a line item for Wi-Fi, not specifically to Ms. Chenoweth's roommate, his organization. Her original proposal was to partner with his company, and it was ultimately changed so that it was a more generic line item in the budget. So both are correct to a certain extent. I'm sure we can have that discussion at a later time. Is there further discussion on this motion, which is to pass this ethics ordinance? Ms. Wyman.
I want to respond to a couple things, and I think, well, the first is regarding Mr. Otto's discussion of Walmart and his comparison with a council member who is with a not-for-profit organization who has worked for to try and get housing for residents. And I think there is a difference, and I'm not a lawyer, and Mr. Holtz is the only lawyer up here, so he would answer more specifically. But my understanding is that, and my impression is that Mr. Otto was correct to not participate in the Walmart discussion because he could have a pecuniary interest, a personal financial interest in any outcome. And so I think it was appropriate that he not take part in that discussion and in that vote, and he was appropriate to not do that. But as I understand it, there's a difference, and I'm not sure that was recognized either purposely or accidentally by Mr. Otto in his discussion, in the fact that the other council member that he named has no personal financial interest, would gain no personal wealth or potential wealth from such action. I guess I think that from the reaction I've heard from people, that was clear in the newspaper article as well. So I suppose I need not discuss that further. There was one other thing that was brought up in public discussion, and I think it's important to make it clear. The discussion of a spouse not having a conflict of interest if that spouse were a member or were to vote on an issue. And I think that's actually not accurate. On page 4 of your conflict of interest and liability book provided by the Illinois Municipal League, it talks about the per se violation that a spouse could have. So it's not to mean that if one council member was to vote on an issue or something in which they certainly had a direct pecuniary interest or even an indirect financial interest, that would not be a conflict of interest. It's just to say that in this case or these cases that they cited, that it's not a per se violation. So I think that wasn't clear, and I'm not sure if even in this, if it's clear for those who read this, but that's my understanding, that it doesn't mean that spouses can automatically vote. I think that the state law and the common law conflict of interest, which is also discussed in this book, explains it. I applaud this council in moving beyond and exceeding the requirements of the state statute that required municipalities, including Urbana, to pass an ethics ordinance. And I do want to echo Ms. Pat's concerns that she brought up, that such an ethics ordinance could be abused, especially as one moves closer to any election time or towards any political opponent, or someone voicing a minority or having a dissenting voice either on a particular issue or on a majority of issues, that such an ordinance, if it has too many tentacles, could end up wrapping around and causing the exact opposite effect of the intent of the ethics ordinance. And so I think that as we've brought it to council and as we've discussed it since, I believe, May of this year, on and off, that I think I think it does a great job in moving forward, and I hope that this ordinance and ordinances like it will not be used to abuse other council members or city staff into prohibiting or into circumscribing their legitimate and free speech interests. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Ms. Chenoweth.
Yes, I support the ordinance. I think that a conflict of interest means that you have a financial interest or an organization has a financial interest. I think spouses, domestic partners, friends sometimes even share bank accounts. And if you share a bank account with somebody, you have a conflict of interest in that situation. So I think that by looking at business partners, et cetera, share a bank account. So I think that by following the money, that's where you find conflict of interest, and that's what this ordinance does, and it is stronger than the state. I do want to say, since there's been a real revisioning of history here on council floor tonight, that for members of the press, both to my left, in front of me, I would love the opportunity to show you the historical documents of conversations on council. The original document that the mayor referred to has in it a request that the community wireless project, which is actually housed at OJC Technologies where I work, that they would give free advice to the city. And in the original proposal, it's outlined in bold at the bottom of the proposal that says absolutely not a penny will go to the community wireless project. It also is outlined in bold at the bottom of that proposal that the equipment will be owned by the city of Urbana. So then that was the original proposal. The second proposal reiterates that in a memo at the top of the proposal. So I'd be happy to provide that to anybody. The mayor and Milton Otto have a different understanding of that, but I think that the public record makes it very clear that partnership initially always meant that basically there's a nonprofit organization that would like to, although I'm not sure they'll do that in the future given this conversation, but would like to donate their time and expertise to the city to provide a wireless connection downtown not a penny will go to that organization. There wasn't a penny in the budget for any organization originally or in the revised version. It was always to equipment, and the equipment is purchased directly. The Community Wireless Project does not sell equipment. So just want to make that clear to the press and any member of the public who want to look at the documentation. It's at the clerk's office.
Further discussion? Mr. Otto.
Yeah, I guess there's a number of things I could respond to. I'm going to limit myself to three. Number one is the suggestion that, an administration could somehow use the ethics ordinance against some minority member of city council or something. And that's just absolutely not the case. Every city council member has it in their control to prevent the ethics ordinance from being used against them, because all that it requires is recusing yourself from issues where you have a conflict. So if you recuse yourself, it doesn't matter how evil or bad you could have Richard Nixon as mayor of Urbana, and he wouldn't be able to use the ethics ordinance against any member of city council. Number two, I think she was just using imprecise language, but Ms. Councilmember Wyman stated that I did have a financial interest in the Walmart decision, and in fact, I did not. I have no interest in that decision, and whether it succeeds or fails will not make me one penny richer or poorer. The third thing, I don't want to get into this too much, but I guess to explain what I mean whenever I say it doesn't make any difference whether you give the money or the equipment or the use of the equipment, it's all the same thing. And, if I give Bruce Walden the key to my car and say, take it, drive it, use it for whatever you want, you don't need to bring it back, ever. I've given him my car. Now, the title at the Secretary of State's office may still say it's Milton Otto's car, but effectively we all understand, regardless of the paperwork, he's been given the car. He's given the keys and told, go use it. So that's where I'm coming from on that. And my point at the end of this is not to suggest that anybody is, ending up with money in their bank account. But that's not the point. The point is these decisions need to be made by people who are neutral and don't have an interest, whether it's financial or emotional or otherwise, in the outcome, to the extent that we can ensure that. And that's why I recuse myself from the Walmart matter. Nobody could fairly say that I was unbiased and neutral in the matter, and I think that's why these other two appointments are especially appropriate examples of ethical violations, regardless of whether money ends up directly in their pocket. No one can say that while they were unbiased and neutral, even if their conscious reasons for proposing and pushing for the measures they were pushing for were entirely good. I mean, again, going back to brother, I think it's a great thing for Urbana that we're adding this retail to Urbana. If I were to have weighed in on that matter, it would have been because I really thought it was a good thing for Urbana. But that still doesn't change the fact that my brother's involved, and it's a vital financial interest for him, and it just wouldn't have been appropriate for me to be involved. So I guess I'll yield back the floor.
Any further discussion? Ms. Wyman.
Mr. Otto mentioned that he didn't see how the ethics ordinance could be abused because someone could just recuse themselves, and I think it's important for those who agree with Mr. Otto to understand or to consider the idea of if someone, perhaps someone in 15 years into the future, 50 years into the future, a mayor was not, didn't want to vote to go a certain way, didn't want either any discussion, any contrary discussion, or needed a certain number of votes to be there for a proposal to pass, he or she could let the council member who he or she thought might not be voting the way that they wanted, that he or she wanted him or her to vote, to suggest that there could be a conflict of interest, to suggest to the mayor's employee, the city attorney, that there might be a conflict of interest, and provide enough concern, provide enough intimidation that council member would decide to recuse themselves, would decide to not discuss the issue, to not vote, and to not even take part in discussion, for fear that they would then be hounded and attacked and face these charges as listed in the local ethics ordinance well, that they would be attacked as such. And so I think that it's important to be clear that there are ways that we need to just consider all of the different ideas and all of the different, and be concerned about when this can be taken too far, and where it's appropriate to draw the line. And I think that from the discussion tonight, I think it's clear that this ordinance as proposed, or as it's come to us tonight, goes far enough, but hopefully will not encourage or allow the abuse of an ethics ordinance to inappropriately take away the voting right and participation of a duly elected official or appointed official in the city of Urbana.
Is there further discussion? Ms. Chenoweth.
I think that it's clear that there's a difference in opinion on this, and I think Milton Otto's statement of saying, we shouldn't even have an emotional interest in policy, I think gets to a difference in philosophy here. We have a director of the tenant union. We have a president of the National Organization for Women. We have people who are involved and embedded in their communities, doing good in their communities, and we want that. We want people like that serving on city council, and of course, we want there to not be a financial interest between their decisions and the organizations in which their board members they serve, etc. But the idea that for some reason, when someone's advocating for housing policies, that Ms. Pat is implicated in that is absolutely ridiculous. We just had an emotional interest in the whole Stratford project. You said you had an emotional interest in the downtown. We want to be interested. We actually want to be interested in the things that we're doing on council. It's the financial interest that is the piece that we want to be very clear about and very much lay down the rules on, and I believe we're doing that. I do think that one statement that Mr. Otto said illuminates perhaps a misunderstanding that he has about technology, which is that by making a reference to a car, he's talking about something that is not a shared resource like street lights or streets or wireless is. So a car is something that you can just kind of let one person drive. But wireless is, for example, something that you let the entire city of Urbana drive. So if you give something away that is for the entire public, and some sector of that public, all the people who have laptops with wireless cards, for example, enjoy a greater benefit to a community wireless network than those who say don't have laptops with wireless cards. That's not, in fact, even in our own ethics ordinance, that's not exclusive. So it should be clear that the city will, if it actually goes through with this idea, will put wireless infrastructure up in the downtown that will serve anyone who comes into that area. It will not serve any organization over any other organization. In some ways, I guess it would benefit downtown businesses, although I believe that that's the whole nature of creating business zones and doing things for downtown businesses. It certainly would not benefit my business or the community wireless, because we have our own wireless infrastructures which are private and separate, but would benefit, for example, restaurants, the library, and other organizations in downtown. It's completely and utterly open to the public. There is no key. That's the point of community wireless. There's no key. You can get online when you're in the cloud, and that's the way it works, and it doesn't benefit. So I think that perhaps you have a misunderstanding of the technology, and there's some idea that this is some limited resource that will go someplace and not others. But that's false, and I'd be happy to explain it to you in more detail if you wish.
Is there further discussion?
I think, the fact that the majority is unable to distinguish between Ms. Pat's passionate advocacy on behalf of tenants or, a belief in principles of smart growth and voting on a matter in which your brother has a financial interest probably illustrates better than anything I can say the particular blind spot that we're dealing with. And, it's unfortunate, but we're probably going to continue to see the kind of stories that we've just seen in the News Gazette as long as this blind spot persists and there's nothing in the ethics ordinance to prohibit it.
Is there further discussion? Ms. Pat?
Thank you. Actually, there was nothing that Mr. Otto proposed that was turned down by this council that would have had any impact on the story that was in the News Gazette. It pains me to see this agenda item being used just to take political whacks at people that some people don't like. Enough already. I think we should vote. I just want to remind folks that this ordinance that we're going to pass is more broad, more comprehensive, and stricter than the ordinance proposed by the Attorney General's office, and more comprehensive, broader, and more strict than ordinances of its kind passed by other communities. Urbana is, once again, going farther and doing more, in this case, to uphold ethical standards than other municipalities.
Further discussion? Hayes, if you'd take the chair.
Your Honor.
I just want to address a couple of things that in looking at the HUD regulations with regard to Ms. Huth's her conflict of interest with Habitat accepting federal funds, in taking a look at the definitions of conflict of interest, one of those definitions is not just a direct or indirect financial interest, but it's appearance of impropriety. And I think that's one thing that we need to address as a city, and go beyond what is the model for the state, and go beyond what other communities have passed in their cities, and be a leader in this area. And when we do have, it is hard for active members of a community of our size not to occasionally run into a conflict of interest. Mr. Otto had one where his brother was a developer in the Walmart. We're seeing one with Ms. Huth and Habitat for Humanity and federal funds. Was it a conflict of interest for Ms. Chenoweth and her roommate and having the city enter into some kind of an agreement with the wireless network? Maybe it's for technology, maybe sometime else it leads to consulting, because the unique software developed can only be serviced by that particular person, and who has a connection with Ms. Chenoweth. Well, even if there is no indirect or direct financial interest there, there's the appearance of impropriety. And I think council member, all of us elected officials and appointed officials need to take that extra step. And when there is that appearance of impropriety, we should take a step back and excuse ourselves from the discussion and say, you know, I've got a conflict of interest in this, and I can't vote on this. And it would happen occasionally. It would happen once a year, maybe, and there are hundreds of votes on this council, so to do that is a reasonable expectation for members of the council and other officials of the city. So, and I think that the addition of the language that Mr. Otto is suggesting addresses that appearance of impropriety in the goals of avoiding a conflict of interest. And that's why I supported it when he proposed it before, and I support it now. I think it's a very common sense and meaningful addition to this ordinance. So I think we ought to not just say, oh, we're better than the state by a little bit, we're stronger than other communities. Let's take a real meaningful step and add this language and have as our standard not only the avoidance of any direct or indirect financial interest, but the avoidance of an appearance of impropriety as well. And I think that's a step we should take. Any further discussion? Ms. Wyman.
I want to say that I find it a disappointment, much of the discussion tonight and the pot shots that I feel are being taken. To me, it's no surprise that the attacks that are being leveled against individuals on the council tonight are against those two of the younger council members and two of certainly the more outspoken members of council. And I fear that up through the elections in April, we'll continue to see more of this, and it certainly concerns me, and I hope it concerns the public as well. And I hope that they won't gratify the what I consider abuse of the microphone to make political statements rather than simply, you know, you could have your own article in the newspaper, you could write out your own press release, but to level accusations against council members, especially when one isn't here, though she supported, as I recall, postponing the vote per Mr. Otto's request, I think is unfair.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Otto.
If Ms. Wyman would like to defer this until Ms. Huth has a chance to appear at council and address the issue, I would certainly have no objection to that. If she wants to defer it, why, I'm agreed.
Is there any further discussion? Ms. Wyman?
Just to respond, I have spoken with her about various council issues. She did not ask for the special privilege of deferring any of the council business, knowing that a lot of these things we've held over and are actually out of compliance with the state requirement to have passed this ordinance, I think, by May of 2004. So I won't be requesting that because she didn't request that or send that email to me. So I just wanted to respond to that so there wasn't any question.
This is a point of information. I think a deferral is only, the council rules, an item can be deferred the first time it appears at a council meeting. And so we're not, this item would not be eligible for a deferral. If we wanted to postpone this, it would be take a motion to table on a majority of the council, not simply a motion to defer in a second. But if the council chose to table it, they could. Any further discussion? If there's no further discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Mr. Otto?
Yeah. Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries with 5 ayes. Next, we have the reports of standing committees, report from the Committee of the Whole. Ms. Wyman, are you chair?
I believe so. Item E, 1A, ordinance number 2004-08-112, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance landfill remediation cost. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
We've got a motion, a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Mayor Satterthwaite?
Yes. Motion carries with 6 ayes. Ms. Wyman?
Item E1B, ordinance number 2004-08-113, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance traffic signal lamp replacement. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Shenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Mayor Satterthwaite?
Yes. That motion carries with 6 ayes. Ms. Wyman?
Item E1C, ordinance number 2004-08-110, an ordinance amending Schedule H of Section 2393 of the Urbana Local Traffic requiring stop signs at a certain intersection, that of Saline Court and Smith Road. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Mayor?
Yes.
I think that should be of the Urbana Local Traffic Ordinance, or I'm sorry, Urbana Local Traffic Code. It should be code.
Right.
But the meaning is the same.
Right. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Shenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries with 5 ayes. Ms. Wyman?
Next is item E1D, ordinance number 2004-08-114, an ordinance disclaiming and quitclaiming to the News Gazette all interest in certain real property encroachment at east edge of 300 West Main. For the committee, I so move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Shenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries with 5 ayes. Ms. Wyman?
There are no further items from the Committee of the Whole. The next meeting will be Monday, September 13th at 7:30 here at City Council Chambers, 400 South Vine Street.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have reports of special committees. Any special committee reports this evening? About reports of officers, we've got one listed, economic development update.
Mayor, I'll just, John's on vacation. You have before you a report. As you can see, there's a lot of things going on. We do have, I might just point out in terms of project status that we have been spending a considerable amount of time on some of the issues in southeast Urbana, Sunnycrest and Philo, trying to come up with strategies, and something that has moved front burner and something that we're spending extra time and effort on. I'll also note for you that up to 551 single-family homes, significant, 100 this year alone, and so on. It's like in terms of new home construction. We spent a considerable amount of staff time on the sweet corn event, and are in the planning for the chili cook-off event, and continue to work on the projects that we have in the ground and those that are pending. If you have any questions on the list, give me a call.
Any questions on the economic development report? All right. Any other reports of officers?
I have none.
Well, we'll go right into new business then. We have a number of items. First is an ordinance approving a final subdivision plat for Savannah Green subdivision Phase 7. This was plan case number 1905-S-04.
It's really not too much to report on this. It is the final plat for Savannah Green and be for 27 lots west of Phase 6. It would finish the dedication of the public streets in that area, and once recorded would complete the 297 lots in the development. Has been sent out to review from the reviewing agencies such as Illinois Power, Water, etc. There's no issues or problems with the plat. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? Not a motion would be in order. Did you have a question, Ms. Wyman?
Just a comment later.
Okay.
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Wyman?
I just want to thank Mr. Kowalski and planning staff, especially with all the new housing development for the single-family homes, and we're seeing more development on campus with housing and retail development there, and in Ward 3 with the condos, downtown development with the Petrie Timponi development, and here with Savannah Green and others. I think that, one thing that we often overlook is all the work that staff puts in to making sure this is possible and compliant with all the state statutes and local ordinances as well. So I just want to express my appreciation, and I suppose it would be a continuing appreciation for all of your work and all of staff's work in bringing all these developments and making sure they get done right and get done quickly. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? If there's no other discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries with 5 ayes. Next is an ordinance approving an extension of the final plat approval, Walden subdivision number 1. This was plan case number 1884-S-04.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself from this matter because of a conflict of interest.
Okay. Kowalski?
The Urbana Subdivision and Land Development Code requires that final plat be recorded with the Champaign County Recorder within 180 days of the mayor signing an ordinance of its approval. That 180 days is coming to an expiration for the Walton subdivision due to unforeseen delays. No fault of the developer, the plat has not been recorded yet, so the project engineer has requested a 6-month extension of the approval of that preliminary plat. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Kowalski? Not a motion would be in order.
Move approval.
Second?
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
No.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion fails.
Why? Point of personal privilege?
Yes.
Can you answer why that fails?
4 votes.
Even when we've got, why does it need 4 votes?
Because every ordinance needs 4 votes.
I see. Okay.
2 absences, 1 abstention, 1 vote.
Pat?
A point of clarification, a motion could pass 2 to 1, but an ordinance requires a minimum of 4 votes? Is that correct?
It's a majority of council members holding office.
Office is what's required for ordinances. For motions that are not specifically ordinances, like a motion to amend or something, it would be a majority of those voting. So if 6 abstained, it could still be, something could pass with 2 votes.
Right.
It's not 6, no, there's only 7, but you know what I mean. Right, okay, just want to be clear on that. Okay.
Mr. Whalen?
Your Honor, excuse me, I would like to make a motion to reconsider item 2.
Second.
We have a motion to reconsider item 2 and a second.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself on this motion due to a conflict of interest.
All right. All those in favor of the motion to reconsider, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Before us is item 2 under new business, an ordinance approving an extension of a final plat approval for Walden subdivision number 1. It was plan case number 1884-S-04. Any discussion? Oh, I guess we need another motion.
Move approval?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Yes, Mr.
Mr. Mayor, I asked to reconsider this because I think that it's very important to the economy of our city. We have seen before the possible influx of commercial development. There are things about this development that we don't feel comfortable with. That is the urban sprawl, the questionable, policies of some people say Walmart doesn't pay enough, Walmart doesn't have a union, but at the same, At the same time, we have seen in the past, in history of Urbana, a number of economic developments that have been met with confusion, with lack of enthusiasm. I am minded of the development of the Lincoln Square Mall, which was initiated by Charlie Weber, a Democrat, judge, lawyer, attorney in our city, and his family had been a major cornerstone in this city. And then Stan Weaver. There was a sure mix of policies and political interests. And that was a big fight. I mean, it was certain parts of the properties was a big fight. The it's a total of 9 blocks that they had to buy and take over to develop that property. It was the first in 1964, mall, so many acres under one roof, and it was heralded as a fine achievement and has had a history of some very nice stores, very nice people-friendly whales and bears and things like that, if we remember. And that's when we had an anchor store that we could look to with pride. I wish that we could do that again, but at the present time, the developer has some plans that might be a different approach to using that property. In any case, that is an example of where Charlie Weber, the Democrat, why do I say that for emphasis, he stepped out of the box and he used his imagination to think in terms of development and progress in our city. Now we've seen a downturn in the use of downtown properties, mainly for offices, and of course because of their proximity to the courthouse. So we really have to look for new ideas. We don't like to see urban sprawl. None of us do. And we recognize the value of our farming community. And however, what this has done and what it might do is challenge Sunnycrest, a secondary economic development area. And it could be, I've talked to people already who own bowling alleys about moving into the Kmart with a bowling alley, particularly Arrowhead and Old Orchard. That's local. But these kind of, creating a secondary area of...
For my work, it's an extension of the final plat.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So if your
yes,
comments could be directed to the, more directly to the item at hand.
Okay, I'm sorry. I just go on because I know that this is the key.
I know you're passionate about this, yes.
Yes. Well, in any case, so I would say that before we can accomplish these things and before we can see growth in our city, we do have to step out of the box. And I would therefore ask your approval unanimously of this development and in the Walton subdivision, number 1.
Okay, any other discussion? If there's no further discussion, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
No.
Mr. Hayes? Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
That motion carries with 4 ayes. Okay, next is an ordinance approving a major variance to allow an increase in the maximum permitted floor area ratio from .40 to .45 at 510 West Michigan Avenue in Urbana's R2 Single Family Residential Zoning District. This was ZBA case number 04-MAJ-11. Yes, Mr. Lindahl. Paul, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. This is major variance case of 2004, Major 11. The proposal is to allow for the construction of a new two-story home addition connected to an existing home with a one-story connection. You have a diagram of the proposal in your packets. And again, this would increase the maximum floor area ratio from 0.4 to 0.45 at 510 West Michigan Avenue. Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Yes, Ms. Pat.
Thank you. Did any neighbors object?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, a motion would be in order.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Yes, Ms. Pat?
I don't actually really have discussion on the motion other than I will support it, but given what just happened moments ago, I suggest that we wait until we have council members. All right, I'll talk about it, but council members should hurry to their seats. Actually, I have a question, and this has to do with the garage. This is both adding on to the house and the garage, is that correct?
That's correct.
Will the house and the garage be connected? There's going to be a pathway through. Will they be connected on the additions, or they'll be connected on the existing parts?
The addition will be connected to the existing house by a one-story connection. The garage will not be connected to either the house or the addition.
Okay. Oh, it's not connected now, and it still will not be connected.
Correct.
And what is the reason for the addition to the garage?
There is just barely enough room for two cars in the entryway. To park two cars into the garage. They want to have a little bit more storage space alongside the two-car entry.
I'm sorry, perhaps I misunderstood you. I read this 2 days ago.
Okay.
The addition to the garage will be a first-floor addition or a second floor?
It's one story.
Oh, it is one story.
It's
Okay.
one story, yeah.
That's
The addition into the
misunderstood.
garage, it's 5 feet wide.
So they're just making the garage bigger for more
They're
cars?
just making
Okay.
it just a little bit wider.
That makes sense. I'm sorry, I don't want to just talk here for no reason at all. I'm really just waiting until we have enough people sitting at the table.
Well, you want to take a 5-minute recess? If there's no objection, why don't we take about a 5-minute recess, and we can come back in 5 or 10 minutes.
5 or 10.
Usually 5-minute recess the last 10 minutes. So we'll call 5.
Okay.
Mr. Hayes, if you could rejoin us. I believe when we broke, we were in the middle of having questions about item number 3 on new business. Ms. Pat, did you have any additional questions or get all your...
No, thank you, Mayor Satterthwaite.
Okay. Are there any additional questions on item number 3? This is an ordinance approving a major variance to increase the maximum permitted floor area ratio at 510 West Michigan. Other questions? Motion would be in order.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? No discussion. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes?
Yes.
Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries with 6 ayes. And now we'll continue, let's see, we dealt with item 3, we'll be at item 4. This is an ordinance approving a major variance to allow a 100% increase in the maximum permitted letter size from 6 inches to 12 inches for an identification sign at the northwest corner of 101 Windsor Road in the R3 Single and Two Family Residential Zoning District, case numbers ZBA-04-MAJ-09. Mr. Lindell.
Yes. ZBA cases 04 MAJ-09 and 04 MAJ-10 are 2 requests for major variances to permit 100% increase in letter size height from 6-inch letters to 12-inch letters on 2 identification signs. Items 4 and 5 on our agenda are ordinances both pertaining to this. Number 4 pertains to Case Major 9, and number 5 pertains to Case Major 10. Again, this is for a change, major variance to request an increase in letter size at Clark Lindsay Village on Windsor Road in South Urbana. According to the zoning ordinance, in order to vary the maximum sign requirements by greater than 15%, the Zoning Board of Appeals had to recommend approval of the major variance and forward it to City Council. On August 18th, the Zoning Board of Appeals considered these requests and in both cases voted unanimously to recommend approval to City Council. Staff concurs with that recommendation. If you have any other questions, we can
Are there any questions? No questions? A motion would be in order?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Yes, Ms. Wyman?
I just want to add, I guess I wasn't aware that there's a maximum permitted letter size for identification sizes, and I'm not sure if it's by zoning district or citywide, but I think as we're looking at redevelopment, and especially development in various East Urbana areas, including Sunnycrest, I think it makes sense to look at whether we need to, in fact, have these sort of permitted letter sizes and how useful or how important that is, and whether it might be useful in kind of streamlining that or looking at that as an option, so that signs so that we can allow identification signs that wouldn't change as far as the amount of space that they take up, but the lettering would be allowed for easier visibility from the street or from other visibility points. But I obviously support these ordinances. I think they make sense. Thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? There's no other discussion on this item. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Motion carries with 6 ayes. As Mr. Lindell said, this is a related item. An ordinance approving a major variance to allow a 100% increase in the maximum permitted letter size from 6 to 12 inches for an identification sign at the main north entrance of 101 West Windsor Road in the R3 single and 2 family residential zoning district. This was case number ZBA-04-MAJ-10.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Mr. Otto?
Yes.
Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
Yes.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries with 6 ayes. We passed item 6 a little while ago, and so we're on to item 7, which is the a mayoral appointment for the Development Review Board. This is the 7th of 7 members on the Development Review Board, and it's my pleasure to recommend for your approval Betsy Cronin of 305 West High. She's the owner and manager of a small pottery studio in Urbana on Griggs Street. She and her husband also own 2 rental properties, and she served on the committee a few years ago that reviewed possible changes to the MOR district. She will serve as the designated member on the DRB as the resident within 250 feet of the MOR. She lives just outside of the MOR, and her term will expire June 30th of 2007. Is there a motion for approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? For discussion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Next is a presentation by Illinois American Water Company representatives. Mr. Holtz, or you want to introduce?
Yes, I'd like to make a brief introduction here. I think it's 2 representatives of the water company, 3. Actually, Sue Schultz showed up too here, and apparently is going to join in the presentation. 3 besides you. Well, maybe you should introduce yourselves, because I only knew of 2 who are going to be coming tonight. I assume one of you is Mr. Terry Glorio. All right, and another is Mr. Ruckman. All right. Well, why don't you come on up? Why don't you come on up to the table and we'll listen to your presentation, and then if the City Council has any questions for you, we'll go ahead and proceed with those questions to the extent you want to take them. Well, now that we've gotten 4 chairs up there, please be aware that those microphones don't have particularly high sensitivity. So if you're going to be answering questions or making statements in turn, you'll have to pass the microphone around.
Thank you. I'm Sue Schultz. I'm counsel for Illinois American, and I've been dealing with Steve in franchise negotiations, which have been ongoing. And during those discussions, questions were raised regarding Illinois American's reorganization, and we thought it was appropriate for the senior management of Illinois American to come to address you. And so I have with me tonight Terry Glorio, who is in the middle here, who is the managing director for the Central Region of American Water. He is also the president of Illinois American Water Company. To Terry's right is Fred Ruckman, and he is the general manager for the state of Illinois. And next to me is Britt O'Neill, who is the district manager for the Champaign-Urbana district. And Terry would like to make a few comments, and then we're quite willing to take questions.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, good evening, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to have us here. I don't have a formal presentation for you all. We really just came here, I guess, just to sort of maybe put a face with a name and maybe get acquainted a little bit, and I guess just give you the benefit of what's going on in our company from my view and the view of my coworkers here. First, a little bit about me. I've been in the water business virtually all of my life, certainly in my professional life. Most of that time was spent with a single company called National Enterprises Incorporated. They were the owner of the former Northern Illinois Water Company. Beginning about the early 1980s, 1982, 1983, somewhere in that vintage, I began sharing my time between work at St. Louis County Water Company, where I had spent much of my career up till then, sharing my time with that company and with the other companies in the Continental Group, which included Northern. And so as long ago as the early 1980s, I became acquainted with the Champaign-Urbana community from a water supply perspective, but I began to understand the issues of the community as it related to water supply, the needs of the system, the caliber and the capability of the people, and all of that. So I don't really feel like a stranger here when I come to Champaign-Urbana, because I've been making this trip for a number of years. I guess I did have an official job title with Northern Illinois Water Company. In the mid-'90s, I was actually chairman of the board of directors of Northern Illinois Water Company. So I did have some oversight responsibility and some decision-making authority with Northern going back a number of years. I've been president of Illinois American since April of 1999, when American bought the company I worked for. And so my association has continued in a way on a more direct level with Champaign-Urbana by virtue of my role as president of Illinois American Water. And we were also able to transport and make use of the talent that was in Champaign-Urbana. And so many of the people who were here traditionally under the Northern Illinois name have broadened their talents and responsibilities in the Illinois American system and even throughout the American system. Joe Harris, who worked here for years in the accounting department, now has a job with the American water system out in Arizona. So whether you know it or not, to the extent that being in this community has influenced those of us who work in the water system here, you've kind of influenced maybe a bigger piece of our company than you realize. And your influence, I guess, continues even though we're going through some organizational change. I guess the kind of service that we want to deliver to a community, the kind of relationship we want to have with the leadership of a community is a lot like what exists and has historically existed in Champaign-Urbana. The Champaign-Urbana community is sort of held up as an example for us as to that's how we ought to be doing water service everywhere. That's the kind of involvement and commitment that we ought to display everywhere. I'm not saying you're unique. There are other communities where we hold them up and say, that's a good community. That's a good, solid place to be. You are important. You were important to my former company, owned by NEI. You're important to Illinois American Water Company. You're important to the entire American system. Our reorganization is not about destroying service level to local communities. The fact is, it had been a good number of years since American had done any kind of a major reorganization. It's coincidental, I think, that it's occurring now with a recent change in ownership of American Water. A year prior to that ownership change, I was on a study committee with others looking at reorganizing the company. And what was in our plan at that time was a plan that would have tried to remove some of the administrative costs, some of the bureaucracy, if you will, that existed. We had, people in multiple locations sort of doing the same thing. And we looked at a way that we could sort of reduce that corporate overhead, not reduce service. We envisioned a company that would have fewer presidential offices, if you will, with big staffs, and a leaner, more of a service-oriented corporate center, oriented towards service as opposed to controlling and making decisions that should be made at the local level. So when I think back about that study group I was in, and I look now at what we're actually doing, a lot of those ideas were in place and really written in an organization model before the ownership change. So it's coincidental, I think. I think had there not been an ownership change, we'd still be going through this or something like it. But really our goal is to get the administrative stuff out of the way of local management. Less burden, if you want to think of it that way, less burden on me from a corporate center, more support. Less burden on Fred and Brent from me, and more support. Decision making at the lowest level possible. It doesn't serve you, and it doesn't serve us if Brent has tied hands and has to go to Fred, who has to go to somebody else, who has to go to me to get a simple question like what name gets on the tank answered. That ought to be local decision making. So a lot of what our reorganization is about is really being responsible with the ratepayers' money, being efficient, and improving service, and improving service by making sure that the people who are on the ground have accountability and authority to make decisions. So that's kind of the background of the reorganization. It's not about just slashing jobs. In fact, the jobs that we have eliminated, none of those have been in the service level. There's some districts in the reorganization where we've actually added staff as opposed to removing them. So It's trying to get the right people in the right jobs and remove redundancy that doesn't bring value to anyone. So that's kind of what we've been doing. I'm pretty proud of, I guess, the caliber and the talent of people we have here in Illinois watching over water systems. We have, and in the reorganization, we've been able to draw on the talent not just from Illinois, but from Indiana and Missouri as well, and we've assembled what I think is a real strong team. We have Fred, who has a long history with Northern Illinois Water Company and with this community, as well as background in the American system now, in a role of statewide authority related to service levels and service delivery. We have Brent O'Neill, who's from this community and has been in the water business for us here in Champaign for close to 10 years at the local level as the in-charge guy. We have people in and around our office who have similar roots in Illinois. So you're not. I think you're in good stead, and we think we're in good stead to have this community in our service area. And I guess I'd like to assure you that we think you got the right kind of stewards watching over your water supply. So, with that, I'll invite any comments from Brent or Fred, or take questions, whatever you all want to do.
Want to have any other comments, and then we can ask questions?
Questions.
Okay, we'll go ahead with questions. Please.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, with all these hurricanes and whatnot going down to Florida and different places, I think I read an article where those things are necessary. I mean, we hear about all the devastation it does, but those kind of hurricanes are necessary to kind of replenish the water supply in that part of the country. So, briefly, could you tell us what an aquifer is, and why is it that the water is so pure in this area that it's something we probably take for granted that other places don't have the kind of water that we have?
And we do have a great water supply available to us here in the Muhammad Aquifer. In general, groundwaters tend to be less subject to contamination than waters that are in a river for obvious reason. It's there's a barrier. I mean, there's a barrier between the surface of the ground and the actual location of the water, and there's also a natural filtering mechanism as that water moves through the gravels and the soils in the earth, and we pump it out of the ground. In general, groundwaters are cleaner, if you want to think of it that way. This one, I think, is probably is the right term, a confined aquifer, which means there really is an impervious layer. So rainfall that falls on the surface, or farm chemicals that get applied, or all kinds of environmental kinds of threats that you might think of, doesn't ever get into the aquifer. That's the reason for its purity, and you're right, we're blessed. Groundwaters are replenished. I mean, there are recharge zones. There are zones into the Muhammad Aquifer that allow that aquifer to become recharged. Those zones are remote from here, is my understanding, and I can only conclude that they probably are in zones that are protected or in pristine areas that are not subject to a lot of pollution. One of our, I guess, overriding concerns, whether it's the Muhammad Aquifer or the Illinois River or the Missouri or the Mississippi River, is the reliability of our source water. and that's reliability from both a quantity standpoint. Will it support long-term needs of a community? And also any concerns about quality. Are there environmental threats to that, source? So the Mahomet is a great source of water. We wish we knew more about what's happening to the Mahomet overall in terms of water levels. Are they falling? Are they stable? There are many users of the Mahomet Aquifer, not just here in Champaign, and so we have an interest in getting more information about the Mahomet. So while we like it and it's a pristine water source, we just shouldn't take it for granted, I guess. So, I mean, we're working through the Mahomet Aquifer Consortium. We worked with the legislature a couple of years ago in trying to fund gets funds appropriated that would help identify the long-term reliability, I guess, factors related to the Mahomet. So it is good, but we need more information about it.
Ms. Wyman?
I had a question on, or concern about local operations or regional operations or lack thereof. As you're aware, in our community, we have more of a turnover than I think in most other communities, at least of our size, because of the university and the number of students and people who live in apartments who tend to move more often than I think in other communities where there isn't the university, where there isn't a large university. And my concern is that. And I've experienced this firsthand, and so I know that when other people tell me about it, it's not just a myth, that when people call to turn off their service and are routed to some other number, some number, I think it's actually in southern Illinois, to turn off their service, that there isn't always the understanding, or there isn't the somehow the data doesn't get entered so that service is turned off on time, bills are stopped on time, changes are made. And I'm concerned about how often this happens. Obviously, I don't know how often it happens because it doesn't seem to be any outside monitoring of this. And I'm wondering with the changes that are happening and continue to occur at your company, if we're going to see an improvement, or how we can be guaranteed an improvement, or I hope an improvement of the operations for people who move and need to turn off service to one unit and turn it on to another unit, to make sure that service does get turned off, that people aren't being billed extra or double billed, and then how there's a sort of any sort of auditing. I think an outside auditing obviously is a more important one than an inside audit of how good a company is. If you could answer those questions or respond.
I'll respond, and then I might ask Fred or Brent to add to that. I know there are some special needs in a university town where, in a very short period of time, a population of water users leave, and a population, maybe replaces them. The process, you're right. The telephone call for service, turn on or turn off, is answered in our call center in Alton. What the call taker does is then order the field work to be done. Final read, turn on, turn off, whatever it is. That's almost an immediate dispatch of what we call a service order, a field service order. That would go to the Champaign office, and then actually that work would be handed out to field service reps to go accomplish whatever it was being asked for. I can just tell you generally that the records I see say that in Illinois we have a good. It says that by 7 a.m. the next day that an order is asked for, we've closed 97% of those orders, meaning we've done the work and entered that information back into the system. We do keep a whale of a lot of statistics about that workflow process. We are continuing, to gauge and measure customer problems and making adjustments. The Alton call center today is staffed differently, and the staff assignments are arranged differently than was originally envisioned, just because they're continually responding to what they hear from customers about issues. I'm going to stop there because I'm just talking in generalities. I know there's some special issues here. Fred was been involved in that at Northern. He's been involved with it at Illinois, and I'm just going to ask him or Brent to speak to your concern. Okay?
Sure.
Yeah, I know firsthand, because for many years I was directly involved in the customer changeover that takes place here in Champaign-Urbana. And the number of service orders that we can actually work in a day is, even within the state of Illinois, the highest here in Champaign of any other system we have. We've worked over 1,000 orders in one single day. Recently, I know that last year, not this year, but last year with the student turnover, we did have some issues where customers and landlords, service was being put in customer names for the landlord or vice versa. Brent and I started talking about that much earlier this year to make sure that we didn't repeat that this year. I know for a fact that we did not have problems this year. Our local staff worked very closely with our staff in Alton to make sure that any issues that we had last year were worked out. So, admittedly, there's been a problem. There was a problem in last year's, what we call the busy season, August being the busiest time. This year, I've not heard of any certainly widespread issues. Not to say when you're working that many orders you can't get a few not handled properly, but I've not heard of any this year.
If I could make a suggestion, and then I'll yield the floor, because I know there are a lot of other questions, that when you have questions answered or calls answered by your call center, there's obviously no receipt, no printout of proof that whoever is changing the service made the call and, asked for it to be done, and so they won't find out perhaps until 2 months later when their next water bill comes, whether the service was actually turned off in their name or not. That if you allow for such service to be turned off via entering it in the through the website of the water company or some sort of way, or a local office where someone could go in person and get that taken care of, so that there could be some receipts, some proof. So if there's a dispute later, I think that would help. I understand that staffing a local office with that, especially with so many people turning over in August, might be more work, and would obviously be more work, but certainly implementing some sort of user-friendly interface through the website might allow for I think a better service and more confidence in consumers that the calls are actually being answered, that the service will be taken care of. Thank you.
Questions, Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes, I had I appreciate this discussion, and I appreciate you all coming and giving us an update on what's going on with ownership issues in our water company. I have a few questions. One is, I remember that the last time, I guess when Northern Illinois was bought by American Water Company, my water bills went up about, I think I calculated at the time, about 10%. Are we going to have an increase in the price of water? Are we going to see a decrease in the price of water as a result of reorganization and therefore greater efficiency? What are customers going to see?
I don't think you're going to see a decrease. I mean, normally, we're in an increasing cost industry. There's always need for ongoing levels of investment. The power, chemical, payroll benefits, all of those costs that we have, that all other industries have, they don't go down. They're always going up. When we save money through reorganization, technology changes, whatever, almost always what that allows us to do is either go, greater time links between rate increases, or maybe reduces the amount of rate increase that we would have had otherwise. Champaign tariff is still the same tariff design that existed under Northern Illinois Water Company. When Illinois American bought Northern Illinois and, merged those two companies, there was not a merger of the cost basis of rates. Champaign still exists alone in its tariff. So if there was a cost increase following, a purchase by American, it had to do with the cost basis of service in this community. It didn't have anything to do with the owner change. Now, in that owner change, though, when we consolidated corporate offices, because when that merger or when that purchase occurred, we had 2 state presidents, 2 state chief financial officers, we had 2 of everything in the administrative level, and we didn't need to have that. And so we eliminated that redundancy, and that resulted in about a $2 million per year savings statewide. Those savings were passed on to the ratepayers. We didn't keep those. So if savings do occur as a result of ownership changes or technology or whatever, eventually they get to the ratepayer, almost never in terms of a rate decrease, because they're just not that dramatic,
Okay. I have a follow-up question, and that is, since American Water Company is now owned by RWE, who owns RWE?
RWE is a publicly traded company in Europe.
Stand for?
Pardon me?
What does RWE stand for?
Right now, it just stands for RWE. It used to be an abbreviation of a long German name that at one time I knew how to pronounce, but today I don't. And we don't need to know that name because the initials RWE are like standalone RWE today. That's all you need to know. So
just to follow up, so I understand your answer, currently our local water distribution is owned by a German company, and that German company is not owned by any larger organization? It's standalone?
RWE is the parent of Illinois American is American Water. The parent of American Water is Thames Water, and the parent of Thames Water is RWE. And if you look for the ownership of RWE, you find individual investors.
Who are those investors? Who are the major stockholders of RWE?
You know what? I don't know, and I don't know if that information is available. I would presume that it is. I would be glad to take that question to my superiors. And I don't know if there are, a majority interest of investors, or if it is just publicly traded and there isn't a majority owner. But I'll find out.
Okay, that would be useful. Thank you. Just a couple other questions. How many people were working out of the Northern Illinois office when it was purchased by American Water Company, and how many people are employed now? What's the number jump?
I don't know the number between Northern and American. I do know the number in this recent reorganization we did. But let me back up a minute. What we did in the merger between Illinois American and Northern Illinois was consolidate functions in a single place where we had redundancy. And that single place was in Belleville because that was the pre-existing headquarters of Illinois American. So the IT department was consolidated in Belleville. The customer service group was consolidated in Belleville. The accounting group, the payroll group, the administrative type of functions were all consolidated in Belleville. There was no impact on like the field service people. We still had local management authority and responsibility here. I don't remember the numbers though, but that's the kinds of things we did.
Just to follow up, will there be local management after this? And also, what are the numbers? You said you knew the numbers of the number of people who would be employed here locally.
Yeah. Answer your second question first. There will be local management here. A part of a whole reorganization is to get accountability and decision-making authority at the local level. So that will be here. We have no intent to close that office.
Okay.
Numbers, we have affected in numbers 7 positions of what was here before. Now, 4 of those positions are in engineering. The engineers who were in the Champaign office were already assigned statewide responsibility. They weren't just doing Champaign projects. They were doing projects for Peoria, for Champaign, for virtually all of northern Illinois. That engineering group has now been moved to have been moved to St. Louis. So it's not like they're gone. They're just in a different location. And then we eliminated 3 positions of, I will say, managerial, administrative type staff.
Okay.
Service people, plant operators, those are not affected.
And will there be further layoffs?
None are planned. My view of the reorganization is that we have accomplished a lot. We've left open the question to relook, so it's kind of a dynamic process. We've added jobs in some areas that we thought initially we could do without. Brent has always got, really the accountability and the expectation that he is always assessing his needs here and always has input into what he believes are adequate staff levels. So we're never done, I guess is what I'm telling you. But never being done can mean staff changes up or down. We always are looking at technology. And some of the questions that you asked about related to how can customers get information, feedback, and websites are a good way to do that. Also, how can we make sure that we get the right information quickly to the field? There's lots of technology issues around that. We're looking right now at systems that would put computers in our service trucks and a GPS tracking device on that truck so that the call taker in Alton, when they're talking to a customer in Champaign, they know exactly who the closest serviceman is, and they can communicate with him, like, directly. Now, those kinds of technology improvements sometimes bring along efficiencies, sometimes bring along, some staff changes, but that's different than the reorganization we're going through. So I just don't want you to, we're always looking at this issue of the right mixture of technology and people, and the best way to do customer service. So we're always evaluating these things. But I can tell you that in terms of what we set out to do in the reorganization and where we are today, we're still dealing with some vacancies. We had a lot of people who voluntarily have retired that we're trying to fill vacancies. We're essentially done. There's no additional layoffs or anything planned. But there may be a few people who are not out yet, some vacancies that we haven't yet filled, so we're still kind of in a cleanup phase, I guess you would say.
When you mentioned, when I asked the question about loss of employees, and you mentioned 4 engineers and 3 management, you're not referring to the people who had voluntary retirement, correct?
No, I'm talking about positions, not people.
Okay, so 7 positions actually, so when there's voluntary retirement, you actually eliminated certain positions, but there was not layoffs, so to speak, at that time. How many folks filled that? How many folks voluntarily retired during this reorganization?
I can't think of any from Champaign who did. We had a number of retirement-eligible supervisors in one of our larger districts in Missouri who elected retirement.
Okay, but no one locally.
Pardon me?
But no one locally, is what you're saying.
No.
When those positions will be filled.
Okay. I don't mean to drag it up. I think that answered my question. I'm focused mostly on obviously Champaign-Urbana. Yeah. I do have 2 final questions, and then I know other council members have questions. I just want to take the opportunity of your presence here to ask some questions. One is, when I call RWE for the service call, where am I calling? Where am I going to be calling?
Well, You're not calling RWE, you're calling the Illinois American.
Okay, so when I call Illinois American after this reorganization, where will I be calling?
Phone will be answered in Alton. Okay.
In Alton?
Mm-hmm. Alton,
Okay.
Illinois.
And then my last question is, are there any pending issues regarding local service with the IEPA?
They're not service issues. We're responding to an IEPA audit recently. To me, the primary issue that came out of that was them questioning a rated capacity of the filters. That agency permitted the plants to be built. They permitted the design and construction of those plants, and in subsequent audits over the years had continued to approve those plants. All of the water quality data, all of the operational data supports that those plants are designed adequately and the operation is proper. And now we have an IEPA audit questioning whether the filters are being operated at the right rate. So we're in the process of responding to that with years of data and years of history to the contrary.
Is that the only issue with the IEPA?
No, there's like two other issues, and that's the one I focused on.
What are the other issues?
One of them is an issue with regard to how close some storm sewers along Bradley Avenue are close to some of our wells. The wells were built there many years ago. The streets were improved. They want to see a certain distance away from the storm sewers to the wells. It's a question that has come up on numerous occasions. We've always responded that the storm sewers are basically the same water that was there before, and that the aquifer is confined and it's protected. The other issue stems from the Thanksgiving pressure drop that we saw throughout the community. Just asking us whether or not we've taken the right precautions to make sure that doesn't happen again and that we follow the right procedures.
Yeah, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Other questions?
I need to add something to you about where your call is answered. Just if I'm here a year from now and you say somebody answered it somewhere else, you weren't telling me the whole truth. The Alton Call Center today is maxed out in capacity. We can't fit another person in there. We've also exhausted the labor pool around Alton, so there is a need to expand both for growth and reliability, and there could be next year sometime a second site that is serving that additional capacity and would also provide some backup. So, but it will operate as the theory is it will operate as a seamless transfer, so it will benefit all of us. It won't be a detriment, and it's just the fact of the labor pool and the area where Alton is. I just want to tell you that in case next year you hear about another location.
I know everything changes in this world, but...
Yeah, but Alton's not going away. This would just be a supplemental.
Okay.
Waylon?
I'd like to touch on that last question that Ms. Chenoweth asked you regarding local employees. You say you're going to have your staff in Alton. Yeah, one of the problems we have, I think, nationally is the corporate system today of downsizing, so that the people who they serve are not able to communicate directly with the people, the customer, and it's very impersonal. We get the phone number to push 1, push 2, push 3, forget it. This whole the corporate structure is so impersonal today. I'm wondering, do you anticipate possibly giving us in this city some personal contact where we can deal directly with people rather than phone numbers or phone?
I think we have some. I'll let Brent talk about it.
with respect to the staff, we have local, I'm here locally as well as our supervisors in that, and a majority of the fire departments have our numbers, and public works departments have our numbers, and developers in that make a personal contact with us directly rather than going through the call center. So it's a personal contact, and we'll make sure, as part of this reorganization, we have to make sure that we update that numbers and make sure that you've got the right contact and going to the right locations that you are. And that's what's sort of our next phase once we fill all of our slots, all of our positions that people are retired from or people that we're trying to do. And that we get the right name with the right people to get you into the right location when you make a local phone call.
Okay. Well, the basis of my question is corporate loyalty to the employee and corporate loyalty to the people it serves, not only to the stockholder. So I'm wondering, do we call you, Brent?
Anytime you want to call me, you can call me, yes.
Really? What's your number?
Well, I'll make sure that you get it.
Really? You can do that, huh? Well, okay, I'm just wondering, we have a chance here to talk with you. We represent the people in this city and their interests, public interests. You represent an institution, a utility. And when you think of utilities, you think of like the old days, railroads and electric companies, and there was a certain standard of stability and almost eternal, seemingly eternal existence and support and responsibility. That's gone. We don't have it today, as far as I can see. SBC, corporations all over the country are changing. And I'm put in mind of a movie that was done back in I think in the 50s, Executive Suite, when the question came up, do we serve the people that we manufacture for in that particular movie? The story was a very good story. Or do we serve the corporate accountant? And I think, unfortunately, while I'm a stockholder in a number of corporations and mutual funds, I still yearn for that kind of personal responsibility. And so I would say the question is, do you think that you can enhance that with your efforts as you see them in the future, or do you think that we're going to go along without any regard for that?
Well, I can tell you, in general, I share your concern. I recently had to deal with a remote mortgage location. I borrowed money to buy a house locally, and that mortgage company sold my loan, and they sold it to somebody else, and then I had a problem. And I agree with you. It's impersonal, and it can be offensive, actually.
Absolutely.
What we're trying to do is be responsive to real issues of customer service that we learn about. The issue of the student turnover and accounts being put in, student's name versus landlord's name or vice versa. I can't guarantee that we won't make mistakes, but we need to be responding to those. We've heard a number of issues surrounding our own menu-driven, voice response, push one, push two, about the difficulty it is to get through. And if you truly have an emergency, the way customers say it to me, they say, why do you make me listen to a commercial if I have a true emergency? Why can't I just get somebody right now? And so we're listening to that, and we're taking all that information and trying to collect that back and make improvements to our own system based on what we hear from customers. Now, and I'll tell you what we're trying to do regarding this, do you serve the bottom line, or do you serve your customers, or do you serve employees? I have a number of measures of my performance that really determines, I guess, whether I keep my job and how well I'm paid. And it's not just about financial performance factors. We began a process of annually surveying employees, and it's asking employees not do they like their boss, but they're asking employees about the behaviors they observe in management and in coworkers. And we preach values. Do we walk the talk? Do we practice them? We say we have business model principles. Do the guys I see live those business model principles, or are they operating under some good old boy network? And how are they behaving? We ask our employees in an anonymous survey to tell us about us as a company and what they think about us. Questions like, would you recommend this company for your son or daughter or brother or sister to come to work to you? Things like that really, get at the heart of what I think you're talking about. We also recently completed a municipal survey where we were asking, because we believe municipal leaders, people like yourself are, we have a stake in this community, and you have a stake in this community, and we ought to be working together. And so we did a municipal survey asking municipal leaders, and I don't know if they were elected municipal leaders or a combination of, civic leaders who might be from a business community, but nonetheless, it was a nationwide survey trying to seek the very information as to what kind of corporate citizen are we, and are we doing the right thing, I guess. What can we learn from you? What would you suggest? We also are doing a customer survey. We used to do them quarterly, which produced a lot of data that created more questions than it probably answered just because of the vastness of the data. We're now aiming to do that annually. So we're trying to pay attention to these other measures of, are we successful as a management team? And it goes way beyond the bottom line. Certainly we have financial expectations, but a real live example from this year, everyone in the Midwest knows that we had cool, wet summer. Well, guess what? People don't use as much water in the summer when it's cool and wet. My managers, the people I understand that. They're not after me to go cut some costs somewhere to make up for that. They understand weather impacts. And not for a minute do they want me to do anything that would hurt the reliability of the service because we had a cool, wet summer. So it's a balanced approach, I think. You will ultimately tell us whether we're being successful. And you will have Brent's number. You can have mine if you want it.
I guess I'll talk to Brent. Thank you.
At this point, ask
Thank you
Bruce
very much.
and Steve if there are any issues related to the franchise extension that we should address while we've got the American Water Company representatives here.
While Steve's thinking about that, I do have one question. Since it's so late, it's 10:30, and I know people are worn out from this meeting. If we have additional questions, can we just forward those to you in writing and have you respond to?
I would say send them to Sue, or maybe give them to Steve, let them go to Sue, and then we'll get back answers.
I think there's probably a lot more questions out there that people are just exhausted tonight and didn't get to. So, okay.
Yeah, Mr. Otto?
I just... not really questions. It's more sort of some issues and some explanation, and I'll try to be quick. But noticed a certain amount of skepticism and almost hostility from this council. It's nothing personal. It's a result of the experience we've had with Dynergy and Illinois Power, where we had a lot of people who seemed to be very sincere, and I think probably were sincere at the time, come in and make a lot of promises about what a great deal this was going to be to have Dynergy taking over Illinois Power and reorganizing things, and boy, our rates were going to go down and we were going to get great service, and it was just going to be a wonderful thing for ratepayers. Well, that didn't happen. And the thing that we found out was all of those sincere, well-intentioned people who made all those promises, when we went back to them to say, hey, what about, what you told us, they were all gone, and they were replaced by, people who didn't have a connection to the community, didn't particularly care about the community, but because Dynergy was in financial trouble, had a mandate to to take money out of the community, and that's essentially what happened. They ended up deferring maintenance for 4 or 5 years, trying to save on maintenance costs by butchering trees, and rates that were set on the assumption that they're going to be making certain investments in the community were paid, but the investments weren't made, and the consequence is that we've had real problems with the reliability of our service. So it's nothing personal. I'm sure you all are very good people, very sincere people, but we've learned some tough lessons in the past 10 years, and so there are certain things that this council has told the administration that we want to see come out of this process, and I think we're very cooperative, and you'll find us easy to work with, but I would just like to go over a couple of those things. One of them is we're putting together a GIS system that tries to pull together the sewer system and everything, map it out, so that when people are developing and that sort of thing, we can avoid conflicts and unexpected surprises. When we're building the library, we had some unexpected surprises that cost us quite a bit of money. So we need your cooperation in doing that. One of the things we would like to do is that we have a baseline, is get an audit of the system by an outside independent auditor, the state of the system right now, so that as the future goes, if we believe that there are problems are arising, we can see whether that's because money is being pulled out of the community and capital investments aren't being made, or is it just sort of a normal wear and tear that you encounter as the system ages. Another one that we've, and we're not just doing it to you, we're doing it to cable companies and other ones too, is a requirement that changes of ownership be approved by City Council. I don't know that we've ever failed to approve a change of ownership, but again, we learned a terrible lesson with Dynergy, and that is that we need to know who's coming into our community and taking over and running these vital utilities, and have a chance to have conversations like this one and get commitments from them that they're going to continue to provide us with the kind of service that we expect. The final thing is, I don't think anyone in this council is interested in trying to see the city run a utility, but it is an undeniable fact that when you look at municipal electric systems, they are better run, provide better service at lower rates than Illinois Power and the privately owned ones. And as a last resort, if there are problems and they're not being addressed, we'd like to have an option to buy out the water company at a fair price, maybe something that can be determined at the time with an appraisal. And that's, the nuclear option if it turns out that 10 years down the road you all are bought out by somebody who is operating in the way that Dynergy chose to operate. Probably none of you people would still be here if they followed Dynergy's practice. But I think that's an important provision, and the kind of progress we can make on those provisions, I think, is probably going to determine, have a big impact on how long a term agreement do we want to go into on this use of right-of-way. If we can get more safeguards, then we can probably go with a longer-term agreement than if there are fewer safeguards, and we want to have the ability to opt out. I guess the final thing is using city right-of-way. There's a lot of users of city right-of-way, and when we're doing city projects, we often have to try to work around them and so forth at great expense. And if we could get some kind of a cost-sharing agreement with you on when we have conflicts with the water company's use of the right-of-way during a city project so that we can work together and resolve it and share costs together. I think that would be important as well.
These are all issues that I know are being discussed in the context of the French, and I know they're important to you, and I appreciate you telling me that. I don't want you at all to think that we interpret this as hostile or skeptical, and we understand, believe me, what you all have experienced with the electric utility industry. There's communities around the state that we hear this, and we know that when we come in here and talk to you, we're saying the same things that you heard from them, and I understand where you're coming from. I just want you to know that.
Thanks.
Steve, did you have a...
Yeah, I have a question or two. There have been persistent rumors locally, anyways, that Illinois American Water Company or some portion of it or some entity that owns it is again up for sale. Is there any substance to those rumors? Those have been going around for the last few weeks here.
No substance.
No substance at all. No part of this system locally, and no parent that owns it is up for sale at this time.
No,
not foreseen to be up for sale in the next few years.
No, I've heard nothing about sales. I've not heard it from American Water. I've not heard it from Thames. I've not heard it from RWE. I mean, I did have the opportunity to speak to an RWE official recently, and he talked about what the investors thought of the American water business, and his comments were all positive. So, I mean, the only substance I can think of that might be related is the ongoing issue we've got with Peoria, where, ultimately that system could be sold to the city. But I mean, that's the only thing I'm aware of of any substance having to do with any sale of assets.
There's, thank you. The pipes in the ground, the water mains and such, some of them have been were laid many years ago, decades ago, and from the information that we have, it seems it's been suggested to us that some or many of them are nearing the end of their useful life, are approaching a time when they would need to be replaced. What plans does the company have for those? And this actually has I think a real world effect on us, maybe even a present day effect. I saw there was an article in one of the local papers today about a water main break in the campus town area of Champaign, I believe, and I haven't gotten verification of that from anybody within the company, whether that actually happened, but apparently caused, from what I read, a significant amount of flooding. Was that related to age of the infrastructure? Has there been any determination of what the cause of that was? And then getting back, of course, to the age of the infrastructure question, what are the company's long-term plans for upgrading the pipes in the ground as needed, and how will that affect the rates that the local citizens will see?
Let me answer the question in the middle with regard to Campus Town.
Yes.
On Monday there was a fire service break, a customer service broke going into one of the buildings that caused their facility to flood. It was not a water main on our side, it wasn't our infrastructure, but it was the customer's infrastructure. Very similar to a service line that supplies domestic service to a house. This is a larger pipe that supplies the fire protection to that building. So when it broke, it produced a lot of water, and unfortunately they didn't catch it very soon, and it filled up the basement of 4 locations along Campus Town. And that customer is fixing the leak as we know it today and tomorrow. So, with respect to the infrastructure itself, we track certain parameters as we go through leak volumes on certain mains. We have we look at industry guidelines on how long a main can be in the ground, and it all sort of is tied to geographical conditions as well as soil conditions on what kind of conditions. A pipe that's put in the ground yesterday can have a leak on it in just a few short period of time for other conditions other than just the material and how old it is. We do what's called we have a main replacement program that we've put all of our mains in a a database that tracks age, but other parameters as well as age, because that's sort of the key. It looks at age, it looks at the type of material it is, it looks at the water quality complaints we're seeing on a certain section of pipe, and those kinds of things. And those get ranked in a certain period. That those are brought forth each year. We do a reinvestment in the system, and we look at replacing mains on a regular basis. If we start to see quantities of main breaks and mains that are indicative of a larger problem that we may have, that main will be replaced in a very short period and be put on that program at a higher rate than the other main replacements that we have. And the investments will sort of change as dictated by what we have to replace on the infrastructure.
Is there a...
Let me just add to that. The whole water, this is a water industry issue. How long do water mains last, and what is the right replacement rate? And there's a lot of research going on in that area, and people are finding ways through, not so much in an area like here, but in some of the very hilly regions of the country, we're just paying attention to operating pressures and using pressure-reducing valves in low-lying areas, things like that, that they've dramatically changed the breakage rate of the mains and maybe extended its life. So there's great debate going on around this whole issue.
Is there a particular age that the company uses as say a red flag age for mains, say something that's been in the ground for 60 or 80 years, that the company says, well, this is just near the end of its useful life, rather than risking a catastrophic break, we're going to go ahead and fix it, given the likelihood of a break happening in the near future?
There are some general guidelines, but you really have to get much more localized with the evidence. The soil condition, I mean, here you've got good soils, you've got tillable soils, obviously. You don't have the high-pressure clay soils. Because it's a groundwater, you don't have extremes in water temperature. Because it's relatively flat, you don't have extremes in pressure. So the pipes in the ground here are not subjected to the same kinds of forces and stresses and fatigue that the pipes in Pennsylvania are. And so the life expectancy is going to be different. And as Brent has pointed out, we've got things we can gauge and measure and try to determine what is the condition, and it's almost an ongoing kind of a process that we have to do. And it really needs to be local. I mean, it doesn't mean we can't learn from others, but it's really based on the performance of this system. People think pipes last 100 years. Some last much longer than that. Some don't last that long. But we know when we're facing something over a 50-year life, we better be paying attention to what our data is showing us.
Are you able to quantify the percentage of pipe that's in the ground by its age? Say, the amount of pipe that's over 50 feet, is it 20 pipe that's over 50 years of age? Is it 50% of that pipe in the ground is over that age? What about pipe that's 80 years old? What percentage of that pipe is
Steve, I think we have some of those statistics, but the more important thing is we have the records that go back to when it was first installed. So if we have a area that we're seeing a high number of breaks on, or something that's pointing to maybe a problem with the pipe, we can go back and actually see when it was installed, what year it was installed, what kind of material, and how it was installed, to give us a better indication of what we have to do. I don't know if I don't know if we have the readily statistics that it breaks it down by year, how many, for pipes, but it's something that we can probably come up with a good estimate of what we're seeing. And as we put more pipe in the ground, the numbers change percentage-wise by the new pipe that we put in the ground.
Can you tell me what material the pipes are made of that Illinois American owns in the Champaign-Urbana community? I know there are different kinds of materials, and as time has gone by, water companies have shifted from one material to another.
The present day material that we're using is ductile iron pipe. It's a derivative of the cast iron pipe that was installed back in the 40s and the 50s.
What percentage of the local system is ductile iron now versus cast iron? Do you know?
Not off the top of my head. That's something we can look at for you. I mean, that would be basically what we'd have to look at is just the time period that they were put in the ground. Prior to cast iron, there was some galvanized mains that were put in the ground. Those go back years ago, and most of those mains, we still have some of those in the ground, but a lot of those mains are being replaced because that's one of the materials that is more likely to have leaks because of age and fatigue and rusting.
When did the company start using principally the ductile iron, the most modern material?
It was sort of an industry-wide, but ductile came available in the late 60s, early 70s, and that's when we made the switch over from cast to ductile. It responds better to pressure fluctuations than cast does. It's a better material to work with.
Thank you.
Questions at this time?
I have just one follow-up. What's the status, a year or so ago when we had the boiler, part of that confluence of incidents was the restoration of the water tower on the north side of Champaign. It's been a year or so. What is the status of that now? Is that operational, or what's the problem with it?
It's currently operational. Back in the fall when we took it out of service to paint the interior and the exterior, the paint coating was at its life expectancy. We do ongoing inspections of the tanks. The inspection indicated we had some structural problems, minor structural problems that we would take care of on a normal maintenance basis. Above the water line where evaporation or condensation causes the rust, which is not protected by the water itself. When we got in to paint the interior, that structural failure was a little higher than what we anticipated, which caused us to delay and bring that back. And when the thing happened on Thanksgiving with regard to our backup generator we rushed it back into service. We painted the interior as much as we could with the understanding that this spring we took it back out of service, fixed the structural problems, finished the interior painting. We had to bring it back into service for our peak conditions. We can't paint the exterior of the tank while it's still in service, so it's scheduled to be out of service starting the week of the 20th to be repainted. And prior to that, we'll make sure that our generators follow our same procedures, where generators are in operating condition, we've got some backup redundancy, and that all of the communities know that our tank's out of service and know the contact numbers to make.
Do you have a notice procedure for that now in place?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
All right, well.
Oh,
yeah, Mr. Hayes?
Every once in a while, it seems like there's a taste of bleach in the water. What's the cause of that?
In Champaign, our source of water has naturally occurring ammonia, which when we add chlorine to it gives us a chloramine, which is not as strong of a disinfection as what some municipalities use, which is called free chlorine, which is the smell of bleach. You smell it like in a pool. It's free chlorine. It's a little easier for the residents, as well as it provides us enough protection. But over the course of the year, we have naturally occurring bacteria that's just a byproduct of the iron of the pipe and the source water itself. And 2 to 3 times a year we go to what's called break point, where we burn off the ammonia and go to a free chlorine, which is the pool smell or the chlorine smell that you smell, which is a little bit stronger disinfection that's going out into the system to help us bring back into line what we want to see in the distribution system on the naturally occurring bacteria that's in the source water.
Well, thanks for coming. I think you've heard a lot of our concerns, and hopefully you'll be able to address all of them. So by next week.